The aliens came in the dead of night, their ships blotting out the stars as they descended upon Earth. Their arrival was silent, eerily so, as they positioned themselves over major cities, casting vast shadows over civilizations that had stood for millennia. Humanity had long speculated about extraterrestrial life, but no one had expected an invasion like this. The world's governments scrambled to respond, activating emergency protocols and deploying military forces, but against an unknown enemy with superior technology, they had little hope. The invaders made their message clear: surrender or be annihilated. Towering war machines moved through the streets, obliterating anything in their path with precision energy weapons. Fighter jets were swatted from the sky like flies, their advanced radar systems rendered useless against the aliens, jamming fields. Naval fleets in the oceans were sunk effortlessly, their meta-hulls torn apart by weapons beyond human comprehension. Communication lines were severed, satellites hijacked, and global infrastructure crippled within hours. The invaders worked with ruthless efficiency, methodically dismantling humanity's ability to fight back. To them, it was not a war, it was extermination. The first days were filled with terror. Civilians ran screaming through the streets, their homes reduced to rubble. Entire cities were turned to dust, and those who survived were either captured or forced to flee into the wilderness. There was no negotiating with the invaders. Those who tried were either incinerated on site or taken aboard their colossal ships, never to be seen again. Their alien overlords did not bother to communicate beyond a simple transmission that played on every screen worldwide: humanity is over. This world belongs to us. For the first time in history, the human race was united, not by diplomacy or shared ideals, but by sheer desperation. Leaders of rival nations set aside their differences, knowing that survival required cooperation. Underground bunkers became war rooms, where the world's brightest minds gathered to find a way to resist. But against an enemy that seemed invincible, hope was fading fast. The aliens believed humanity to be weak, fragile creatures whose only achievements were the cities they had built, the technology they had crafted. But what the invaders failed to understand was that humans had never thrived because of their strength or advanced weaponry. They had survived through resilience, adaptation, and sheer determination. And as the ashes of the first battles settled, that very nature of humanity began to surface. In the ruins of fallen cities, survivors gathered in small groups, whispering of defiance. Engineers salvaged scraps of technology, alien parts to create makeshift weapons. Scientists worked tirelessly in hidden laboratories, analyzing the alien materials for weaknesses. Soldiers, pilots, and civilians alike trained in guerrilla warfare, ready to fight with whatever they could find. The world had changed, and so had its people. They were no longer just defending their homes, they were preparing to reclaim them. The invaders, for all their power, had made one fatal miscalculation. They had underestimated the will of humanity. What they saw as a final conquest was, in reality, only the beginning of a resistance unlike any they had ever faced. What the invaders saw as defeat, humanity saw as a challenge. Across the globe, survivors banded together, using their adaptability and ingenuity to strike back. Conventional weapons had little effect on the alien armor, but humans were nothing if not resourceful. Scientists worked tirelessly to capture alien tech, while soldiers and civilians alike devised guerrilla tactics that baffled their enemies. Cities once thought lost became strongholds of defiance. Underground bunkers were transformed into war rooms where battle strategies were mapped out, and every person was trained to fight. The aliens had expected a quick conquest, instead, they found themselves locked in a brutal war they were unprepared for. From the shadows, resistance cells emerged, striking at supply lines and sabotaging alien infrastructure. Once considered relics of outdated warfare became vital weapons, shutting down the enemy's technology. Hackers infiltrated alien communication networks, disrupting coordination among the invaders and feeding them false intelligence. What the aliens had thought was a disorganized and broken species proved to be a tactical nightmare, humans were unpredictable, relentless, and willing to sacrifice everything for their survival. The resistance was not limited to soldiers alone. Engineers, alien technology, creating hybrid weapons that could penetrate their impenetrable defenses. Doctors and medics devised new treatments to counteract the strange biological effects of alien weapons. Farmers and supply runners ensured that the underground networks remained fed and sustained. In every sector of life, humanity adapted, fought back, and refused to be erased. Every time the aliens adapted, humanity countered with something unexpected. When the invaders developed shielding that neutralized, resistance forces turned to more primitive but equally devastating methods, explosives, weaponry, even biological warfare crafted from Earth's own microbes that the aliens had no defense against. The war became a battle of endurance, and humans were masters of survival. They had endured plagues, wars, and natural disasters throughout their history. This was just another test. Propaganda played a vital role in the fight. Resistance leaders broadcast messages across the remnants of human infrastructure, reminding people that Earth was their home and they would not be forced into submission. Stories of small victories spread like wildfire, inspiring others to take up arms and continue the fight. Hope, more powerful than any weapon, fueled the resistance. The alien overlords, who had once been confident in their total domination, found themselves struggling against an enemy that refused to be broken. Despite the overwhelming odds, the tide of war was shifting. The first major victory came when a resistance force successfully captured one of the invaders' command ships. Using salvaged alien technology, they managed to pilot it into a orbit, broadcasting a defiant message to the entire galaxy. We are still here. We are still fighting. And we will never surrender. The message was heard not only by the invaders but by other alien civilizations who had been watching from the shadows, waiting to see if humanity would fall. The war was no longer just about survival, it was about proving that humans were more than the invaders had ever imagined. The aliens, for all their advanced weaponry, had never fought a war like this before. They had conquered countless worlds, but they had never faced a species that turned every disadvantage into an opportunity. For the first time, fear crept into the ranks of the invaders. Their fleets, once unstoppable, now faced an enemy that refused to die. Their weapons, once unmatched, now had counters. Their strategy, once foolproof, was now unraveling at the hands of an unpredictable, unbreakable opponent. The resistance had not just survived, they had turned the war into something far greater than survival. They had made it clear that Earth was not a world that could be conquered. The invaders had made a mistake, when they would not live long enough to repeat. The battle for humanity's future had only just begun, and the war was far from over. The war raged on, but humanity was no longer just surviving, they were winning. Captured alien technology was now turning the tide of battle. The resistance had learned to use the enemy's weapons against them, creating artillery, plasma rifles, and new forms of electronic warfare that disrupted alien communications. The war machines of the invaders were now vulnerable, falling one by one as humans adapted and improved their tactics. The skies were no longer dominated by the enemy's ships, countermeasures had forced them into retreat. What began as an uneven battle had now transformed into a strategic war, where humanity dictated the terms. One of the greatest breakthroughs came when a group of human hackers managed to infiltrate the alien command network. Using captured equipment and the sheer ingenuity that had kept them alive, they cracked the invaders' encryption, gaining access to classified intelligence. The information revealed key weaknesses in their fleet, hidden bases, and most importantly, their hierarchy. The aliens operated under a rigid command structure. If the leadership fell, their entire invasion force would crumble. Humanity had never been stronger, and now they knew exactly where to strike. Coordinated attacks began against the enemy's infrastructure. Resistance groups worldwide launched offensives on strategic alien bases, cutting off their supply lines and isolating their command centers. Alien factories producing war machines were destroyed, their ships hijacked and turned against them. The invaders, who once saw Earth as an easy conquest, found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. What had started as small victories had now become a counteroffensive. Every attack brought the aliens closer to the realization that they were losing control of the war. The psychological toll on the invaders was evident. Their arrogance had been shattered, replaced with desperation. What was supposed to be a swift conquest had turned into a prolonged nightmare. They had underestimated humanity's resilience, and now they were paying the price. Morale among the alien forces plummeted. Their supply chains were stretched thin, their elite commandants eliminated, and their forces spread too far to maintain control. The fear they had once instilled in humans was now reflected in their own eyes. They had become prey. In one of the most daring missions of the war, resistance forces launched a direct assault on the primary alien command hub. The facility, hidden deep within an abandoned city, was heavily fortified. But humanity had spent years learning how to overcome the enemy's defenses. Using a combination of sabotage, aerial strikes, and infiltration teams, they breached the stronghold. The battle was fierce, but humans had become more than just survivors. They were hunters now. They took the fight directly to the invaders, leaders, cutting down officers and seizing vital intelligence that would aid in the final stages of the war. The turning point came when a captured alien warlord, Duris, confirmed the unthinkable. The invaders were planning a full retreat. Their leadership had concluded that Earth was no longer worth the cost. What was meant to be a simple occupation had turned into an unwinnable war. The invaders had lost control, and now their focus was not victory, but escape. This knowledge fueled humanity's determination even more. They had not just survived an alien invasion, they had fought back and brought the enemy to its knees. But there was still one final battle to be won. The resistance prepared for the ultimate strike. Using everything they had learned, they gathered their forces for a decisive assault on the alien flagship orbiting Earth. If they could cripple the enemy's last stronghold, they could ensure that the invaders would never return. This was not just about survival anymore, it was about vengeance, justice, and reclaiming their planet. The war was nearing its climax, and humanity was ready to finish what had begun. The invaders had underestimated them once. They would not make that mistake again. Realizing they could no longer win, the aliens attempted to retreat, but humanity was not willing to let them go so easily. The final battle was not one of survival, but of retribution. Humanity launched a counteroffensive unlike anything seen before, pushing the invaders back into space. Every weapon, every strategy, every lesson learned from years of battle was brought to bear in one decisive moment. Resistance forces coordinated strikes on key alien strongholds, severing their last remaining supply chains. Captured alien warships, now under human control, turned against their former masters, bombarding retreating enemy fleets. The ground forces, hardened by years of guerrilla warfare, led relentless attacks on the few cities that remained. Every remaining alien outpost was systematically destroyed, leaving no room for resurgence. Humanity was no longer merely fighting to survive, they were making a statement. They would not be conquered, they would not be subjugated, and they would never again be underestimated. The final push came when human forces, now equipped with advanced alien technology, launched an assault on the last operational enemy mothership orbiting Earth. The ship, once an ominous symbol of the aliens' power, was now their last refuge. But the invaders had nowhere left to run. Human strike teams infiltrated the ship, moving with deadly precision through its corridors. Resistance hackers overrode its security systems, shutting down life support in critical areas and disabling its weapons. Explosions rocked the massive vessel as sabotage teams planted charges along vital infrastructure points. The mothership, once invincible, was now vulnerable. Inside the ship, the alien commandants, once confident in their superiority, now sat in fearful silence. They had underestimated humanity's resilience, their ability to adapt, and most of all, their sheer refusal to surrender. The war, which they had begun with arrogant certainty, had become their downfall. As fire and chaos engulfed their stronghold, one final act of defiance remained. Human forces, led by their most warriors, stormed the command center. The last remaining alien legions were cornered, their empire reduced to smoldering ruins. They begged for negotiations, for mercy, but humanity remembered. They remembered the cities that had burned, the people who had died, the families torn apart. There would be no negotiations, no surrender terms. There was only justice. The final blow came as the mothership's core detonated in a fiery explosion, visible from the surface of Earth. The last remnants of the alien invasion force were scattered, their retreat now a rout. Ships fled into deep space, their commandants knowing they could never return. Earth was no longer a battleground, it was a graveyard for those who sought to conquer it. The resistance forces, now victorious, stood among the wreckage and watched as the last enemy vessels disappeared into the void. Silence fell over the battlefield. The war was over. As humanity surveyed the ruins, a single transmission was broadcast across the galaxy. A message not just for the defeated invaders, but for any who would dare challenge Earth in the future. To any who think of invading Earth, remember this: we are not weak, we are not prey, and we will never kneel. The message spread far beyond the remnants of the alien fleet, reaching distant civilizations who had once observed humanity with curiosity or disdain. Now they watched with newfound respect and, for some, fear. The species they had once overlooked had defied an empire and emerged stronger than before. No longer mere survivors, humans had become something more. Warriors, conquerors of those who sought to oppress them, a force that could never again be ignored. In the aftermath, Earth began to rebuild. Cities were restored, civilizations were pieced back together, and for the first time in years, humanity looked up at the stars not with fear, but with ambition. They had mastered alien technology, harnessed new powers, and united in ways they never had before. The war had changed them, forging them into something greater than they had ever been. The invaders had come believing Earth to be an easy conquest. Instead, they had created the fiercest force the galaxy had ever seen. And now, as humanity took its first steps beyond the boundaries of their solar system, they carried with them a new understanding: this was only the beginning. The galaxy had underestimated them once. It would not make that mistake again.